Hello again and welcome to another Articulate Outburst podcast. In the last episode we did politicians. A lot of people think our music is political. Punk has always been political. I don't really think it can be argued. Not so much American punk, but definitely British punk has always had that kind of finger up to the establishment, tear down the establishment, that kind of thing. So for quite some time we kind of point our political finger more at hypocrisy and things that just don't add up, as opposed to the people and who they stand for and what they stand for. I think in the last stream we covered politicians in my lifetime and politicians of where we are today. I think there's not any people that would agree that I don't know whether it's because I'm getting older or whether they're just duplicitous sons of bitches now, but I just generally get the idea that we're not being served by them. Perhaps we never were, perhaps it was just me turning into an old cynic. But the evidence, I think, is categorically in that way. And obviously there's more global institutions on the field of play now, such as the United Nations, which ceased to become what it was that it started off to do. There's the WEF, which is the World Economic Forum, which I won't labour on, and that's a stream on its own. Then we've got the World Health Organization, which is again seeking to do what it's not supposed to be. Also to say what it wasn't set up to do. It's now being run by administrators, it's not really run by doctors, and it's on a power grab. So I think if you look across the world stage, across all these large institutions, add to that the NGOs, our politicians are small fry when it comes to actually dictating the ways in which we should live our lives. And I think over the last 5 years, predominantly, our wealth, our prosperity and our hopes and dreams have been cast aside. And we're told we're going to get less. In my lifetime, I can go through a list. In fact, I've written one up. Surprisingly, I never script these things. I've written up a list of things that are getting considerably worse. Toilets that don't flush, you've got to flush them twice because there's some button on there. And you're like, why would we put, why? We've got water sewage treatment works, it rains in this country, we've got reservoirs. Why are we pushing a button when the toilet don't work? Who are we kidding? I go to the supermarket and I buy salad in a bag, I buy a cucumber in plastic. Everything's in plastic yet. I can't carry a plastic bag from the till. What world are we living in? Who are we conning? So it's things like this, blatant hypocrisy of either a sticking plaster to stop a flood of blood, or just some piss poor virtue signalling box ticking exercise. We can see the world is enshrouded in plastic. I like to think that since we've been separating our rubbish into recyclables and normal rubbish, I think we've got more of a pollution problem. And all of a sudden it's like, spare me the cure, it's worse than the disease. So I'm going to go through a few streams today with what I consider to be the hypocrisy and the absolute madness by which we live our lives. And today's episode is the green agenda. So, feeling a little bit better, I've invented my spleen. I've written a couple of songs that have alluded to this. The first album, obviously, the fabric of all these inconsistencies runs through the album, and the second album, Heroes and Bad Actors, it's a little bit more, how can I put it, contradictory, belief system specific. So the green agenda, let's start from, and I can only do it, and people call it the lived experience. Well, I don't really think there's any other. I remember things. I don't know why I do, but I remember things, and they stick in my mind. I can't remember what I did last week, but certain things in the epochs of time stick with me, and I can't unsee them. So going back to the original kind, let's talk through the climate changes as I remember it as a kid. There's always been the spectre of doom that the car is the work of the devil. Now in the 1970s, I'd kind of grown up and we used to read sci-fi and Marvel comics where the future were rockets, fast cars, highways like 4 mile wide, that kind of thing. And you kind of thought that would be the future. People might say you're reading a comic book, but not really. That's for the hopes and aspirations, otherwise it wouldn't have been in those books. And it wouldn't have been in those kind of like Tomorrow's World and other science programs that we were shown. You know, I would have thought by now that the British motorways would have been similar to the German autobahns, where there'd be unlimited speed limits. Cars are built so much safer, so much faster. You get a lot more bang for your buck. We've got carbon disc brakes, we've got low profile tyres in 1970s. What a pipe dream when all those laws and all those speed limits and all those kind of stopping distance were all set in. My car stops on a sixpence, yet it's still, in some ways, welded to the time that cars were unsafe with cross-ply tyres that would turn over in a heartbeat. You know, an inch of tyre with a millimetre of tread. And over time, you look at what's been improved. With cars, a lot less glass in them. They got and originally in my day, it was from leaded petrol to unleaded petrol. That was the first kind of, let's con the car manufacturers into building new cars. So that was the first wave of, who knew that lead was in petrol? I know it was higher octane. So the first kind of thing, thinking back, was unleaded petrol came in. And there were a lot of cars that couldn't make it. A lot of, I think, British Leyland cars, MGB GTs and other stuff really struggled with the conversion to unleaded. The firing mechanisms wouldn't work. So I think that they probably got rid of a raft of cars with the leaded to unleaded. But then you couple this with a society doing much better off. We adopted unleaded, you know, car growth still continued. And over time, cars have got predominantly safer, and I mean safer on every single metric, from the amount of glass in them, to airbags, to ceramic brakes, to vented discs. The list goes on and on and on and on and on about how safe cars is. Guess what we're doing? We're slowing them down. So you're kind of thinking, well, hang on a minute, it's like contradictory, we're making them all safe. I mean, 20 miles an hour in a suburban street now is the norm, and rightly so. Who could go more than 20 miles an hour in a suburban street? But by legalising it to make sure it is 20 miles an hour, means your engine's coughing, spluttering, you're polluting the air, the very thing that they're trying to prevent, because cars are built to a standard, certainly petrol and diesel, modern diesel cars are built to an higher standard now. Mine is chugging at 20 miles an hour, it's in second gear, polluting the atmosphere. So the very thing it's set out to do just seems to be kind of contradictory to what it is actually achieving. And, you know, 30 miles an hour now, I think, you know, when you consider that we've now got street lighting, hatch markings, junctions that have got like practically luminous paint on, all the things you saw in the 70s, which were dark junctions, obscured by foliage, traffic lights that barely worked, unmarked junctions, all these have gone. All these have gone, so you can pretty much predict the kind of stage of play in the road ahead. There are no kind of, ooh, what could be around that corner like it was in the past. You'll know because the signage, the roadside furniture, the layout of the road has all been changed. So I almost encourage you to want to go faster because you can see that it's clear, the vistas are clear, there's a wide path at the side of the road, making it impossible for anyone to dart out that you could ever run over. Yet, out there they are with the speed guns, back it in, stop it, £100 fine, your insurance is going up. So there's a lot of contradictions out there, I think, with motoring and the green agenda as a rule. So yeah, so we went from leaded to unleaded fuel. Then it was a catalytic converter. Oh, I had to have a catalytic converter. So the catalytic converter got out £2,500 when they first came out. I mean, 1990s, that was not cheap pieces of kit. And when they failed, you knew about it. It was an expensive repair. But we overcame, catalytic converters came in. And again, but we're still polluting, we're still ruining it for everybody. So we've got home working, vehicles on the road, probably travelling a lot less now, but oh no, that still doesn't count for anything. So what we've got is this kind of position whereby we were taught throughout our lives that the world would be our oyster. We could travel, we could go here, there and everywhere. And my words, that's getting reined in. The thingy, the cough and the splutter that spread across the world. Originally, it came from a lab and we all got shut down for saying so. Now, it came from a lab. So what else did we get right with our conspiracy theories? So there is a definite global movement to trap us and make us travel less, whether you choose to accept that or not, be that the humble car, be it your ULEZ, expansion zones, obviously Sadiq Khan's on board with this, be this increased costs of travelling. I know that the world hate us going on our summer holidays every year, but I think they'll have to swallow that. I think that really would be, from the Brits' point of view, if we can't go on our 2-week binge abroad, I guess there'd be some civil unrest if that were curtailed. But let's not put it past them. And if digital currencies come in, you can bet your bottom dollar you'll only get a week. So use cash whenever you can. So with the green agenda comes a whole host of other like a hydra of other stuff coming at you across all boundaries. The CO2 in the atmosphere, the carbon monoxide in the atmosphere. I remember kind of everyone wearing sun creams because everyone was getting skin cancer. Malignant melanoma was the thing. And it's only because I've been around now for into my 50s. I can remember previous advice, and you're thinking, this advice seems to ignore all the other advice. It's almost like there's no chain of command, there's no chain of linear history on this. It's almost like we're as bad today as we were then. And actually, no, we're not. We've done a hell of a lot to overcome this unnecessary trip journeys. But then, couple that with public transport that up until a few weeks ago was very expensive. I think they've cut the price of a bus ticket to £2. I don't know how they're funding that. But that's what it is. So just on here, I put a list here of the things that have safety cars these days. Plastic bumpers, reduced glass, seat belts, airbags, ABS, vented disc, collision avoidance systems, LED lights, fog lamps, distance set, computers, catalytic converters, unleaded fuel, cash sidebars, retention seat belts. One thing as well which I've come across as well, there's no pedestrians anymore. We live in a car culture. People get dropped off at school, get picked up from school. Very rarely do you see people. Maybe when the kids come out of school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you've got to be a bit more careful. There's nobody else walking the streets, that's it. There's virtually no pedestrians yet. You could kill a pedestrian. Oh, I'm sorry, tell a lie, the students up at the student area do a lot of walking. So other than the schools getting bolted out and the students probably can't afford a car, there ain't that many pedestrians anymore. People go to the shops in the car. We've got out of town, forgot about that. We've got out of town shopping malls now, which has stopped people going into town. You can't get in a Leeds city centre these days, my area, because they've shut it to cars. It's like, well, obviously you don't want us there, and no one's going there yet. All the safety, all the penalties are packing in, and you're like, well, you've kind of sent us elsewhere anyway. Cycle lanes are what you can go on about. But then that's another thing as well. You get roadside furniture, speed cameras, you get a whole host of things that prevent you from having an accident. You can never see what's going to come out of a side street like a cat or a dog or something else, or even a car. But you can see the road ahead. You've got clear vision of the road ahead. Yet we're still being punished as if to say an accident could happen at any time. And I see some of the drivers that are going round and you think, well, that's why accidents happen. So the whole green agenda and the polluting, the car being the villain, has been under the cosh for 30 of my, well, probably 35 to 40 of the 55 years I've been on this planet. Whether it's a polluter, whether it's a dangerous machine that's going to kill everybody, you name it, it's always been under the cosh. Yet ultimately, I drive 22,000 miles a year. I couldn't do it on the train. So at some point I couldn't do it in an electric car either unless I'd be slept in it half the time. So that it's these kind of contradictions, that there's no alternatives, only punishment for what we've currently got. And this bullshit about it and the environment being damaged by the carming, we chop trees down. If you look at a tree, it's 90% carbon, and when you get a 100-ton tree that's solid carbon, that's an awful lot of Range Rovers. That's an awful lot of Range Rovers from one tree where carbon's locked away out of the atmosphere. In carbon-rich environments in the past, foliage was much bigger. The tree leaves would be bigger, the grass blades would be bigger. So I don't see how carbon is even an issue. And if we did have an oxygen-rich environment, wildfires would be probably a lot more wilder than we see now. So I can't help thinking that the simple solutions to the carbon problem, such as foliage and trees that have been ignored, to push windmills, solar and other expensive things that come out of my taxes and out of my bills to enrich other people. So that's the kind of hypocrisy of the green agenda, and even methane breaks down to carbon dioxide after 10 years. So the whole idea that all the animals are going to go and we're going to have a veggie diet and a meat-free diet and all these things are kind of labour intensive isn't for our benefit. We know that that's for somebody else's benefit, somebody who's going to make a lot more money, and it's going to be our impoverishment, our lack of options, and a much more controlled future for ourselves. And this is not a conspiracy thing, and this is in existence, it's there. We can see what these people want. They publish it on their websites. We know how these things work. And I don't propose to kind of hammer the green agenda that much, but there are other forces at work that are pushing this green agenda, top-down stuff, not the people not on the streets with the placards. Most things happen from the top coming down under the guise of it being a green agenda kind of movement where people are getting sick and people are getting poorly. One thing I did find quite interesting, and it's doing the rounds on YouTube, is there was a kind of straw poll on the ULEZ expansion zone for Sadiq Khan, and they've tested the air in the underground stations to find it's something astronomical compared to what's happening at ground level, so I think the poor bloke might be in trouble there. The problem is it don't really matter what you prove or what you don't prove, because it just happens anyway. You know, you can come up with all the objections under the sun, and everyone will sit there and all the YouTube channels will talk about it, but it still continues to happen. We're all sat there as experts, but we're absolutely powerless to stop this. And you can point to that, and you can point to the other. There'll be some scientific paper that's being bought and paid for by somebody who can afford it to tell you the exact opposite of what you know to be true. And they'll come out with all the bump and all the facts and figures to actually prove you're wrong and actually question what you actually believe to be true. So that's pretty much it. So the new song that's kind of battened on at the end of this is Eco-Terrorist. And that's not about the people with the paints, that's about the people that are driving it from the top down, the power centres, the people that are making it happen, whether we like it or not, under a veil of we're protecting the planet. So that's the green agenda off the bat for politics. Thanks very much for listening. If you could like and subscribe to the video. Sorry there's not much music going on in this one, but you know, this is how we drive our engine, and you know, politics has always been a major part of punk, and that's what we're doing today. So thanks again for listening. If you could like, subscribe, share the video as much as you possibly can. I'll see you in the next one, and thanks very much for all your support. It's much appreciated. Thank you.